To evaluate the limit as x approaches 0 of the absolute value of x over x, we could try direct substitution, but if we did that, we would get the absolute value of 0 over 0, which is undefined, and so that's not going to help us any. So we might want to look at the graph of this particular function, or we might want to make a table of values and look and see what is happening as we get closer and closer to 0 from both the left and the right. If I take the limit as x approaches 0 from the right, and I'm going to put a little plus sign to say I'm coming from the right, of the absolute value of x over x, then that means that I'm choosing numbers that are to the right of 0. So let's back up and let's say that we were to let x be 2. If we let x be 2, we would have the absolute value of 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. If I substitute in 1, I would have the absolute value of 1 over 1, which is equal to 1. If I substitute in 0.3, I would have the absolute value of 0.3 divided by 0.3, which is 1. So it appears that if we get closer and closer to 0 from the right of 0, that our values are at 1. On the other hand, if we take the limit as x approaches 0 from the left, and we plug in numbers that are smaller than 0 but are getting closer to 0, we can do the same thing we did on the last one. For example, we might substitute in negative 2. If I put in negative 2, I would have the absolute value of negative 2 divided by negative 2. Well, the absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. Divided by negative 2 gives me negative 1 this time. If I plug in negative 1, I'll have the absolute value of negative 1 divided by negative 1, which is 1 over negative 1, which is negative 1. If I chose negative 0.1, again, I would end up with negative 1. So the values, as x gets closer and closer to 0 from the left, it appears that it's equal to negative 1. So for a limit to exist, and we could even look at a graph of what this looks like, as we get closer and closer to 0, it's undefined at 0, by the way, but as I get closer and closer to 0 from the right, my values are all at 1. As I get closer and closer to 0 from the left, my values are all at negative 1. And the definition of a limit says it's a single value that f of x is getting closer and closer to becoming as x approaches a value from both the left and the right. So that tells me that this limit does not exist. So there is no solution to this problem because there is not a limit.